Welcome back, I'm GTGD and this is video 13 where I'm going to save data to file. It's a very interesting video and we're going to start the process of saving the world information to file, and in the next two videos we'll basically restore the world from file. So it's super interesting and super applicable to so many different types of games. Alright, so I'm going to make a new script, but in terms of scenes, I'm going to jump back to the game scene because I'm going to attach my new script to the game manager, and the new script is going to be called basically game manager. So let me write that in, game manager, and save load, I suppose. Save load will do, and go ahead and open it up. Alright, so inside of my script now, I'm going to say using system.io and using Unity engine.scene management. Alright, so basically, yeah, from this we'll be able to use our input-output system, and you'll be seeing everything that we're going to do in just a bit. So in terms of variables, there are quite a few. There's quite a bit to define here. We've got some custom classes to make as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get into it. So public game manager tile placement, G manager tile placement. So I'm going to save the state of the player. So I'm going to make my strategy is I'm going to write everything to the same file, right? And this file is going to have information on the world tiles, so all of the tiles that are in the world that the player has placed, everything in the construction layer, basically, in the construction tile map rather. And then I also want to, in the same, because I don't want to have multiple files, I can just easily have it all in one file. I'm also going to have information on every NPC in the game, right? And I'm going to have information on the player and basic stuff like time and so on. So you can see I've got three distinct groups of data. So I call it like basic data, I've got my NPC data, and I've got the tile map data. And all of these, I'm going to put them into the same file, and you're going to see my strategy in how I separate the content inside of that file to make it easy for retrieval later on. And so that way we don't need to use multiple files or anything like that. We just use the one save file with just a bit of common sense approach. Okay, so public transform player, that's my next variable. Public, so these are all my references. Public game manager, and it's going to be, I guess, my time script, and I'm just going to call it G manager time this time around. And the next one is public transform NPC container. Right, okay, so I need to go ahead and make a game object and drop our NPC into there. So before I go further, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I jump back into Unity, and you see our NPC here. He's sitting in the root of the world. I'm going to make here a new empty game object. I'm going to zero it out just for the sake of it, and I'm just going to call this like NPCs. Alright, and I'm going to drop my NPC into that, and this is going to be my NPC container, and it'll make my life a lot easier to collect all of them and basically save their data to file. So you'll see that happening in just a bit, basically. So let me just drop on these while I'm here. I've just dropped the script on. I'm just going to drop in all of the references while I can, because why not? I'm here, that way I won't forget it. And my NPC container as well. I could even call it NPC container so it's more descriptive and obvious what it is. Why not? Why not? Let's do that. Okay, so that's done there. Let's jump back to the script and keep on going. We've got plenty more to do. So the next thing is to define stuff for the save file itself and the save directory. So public string folder name is my next variable, which I'm going to call save data. That's what my folder will be called, and you're going to see where it's going to be and all of that in, well, when we get into this video and get a lot more through it. My next is a public string file extension, and my extension, I choose it to be a .txt, so I can just easily open it up and have a look inside what data has been written there, and I'm just not worried about the player changing it. Next thing is a private string folder path. Another one is private string file path. That's my next variable. You know, I could just do commas and just define a whole lot of variables in a single go. That's what I meant. Like, I'm not consistent in that matter. I just, for whatever reason, just doing it like this. Okay, next one is a private string. It's an array. File paths is what I'm going to call it. Next one, private string file path to load. Okay, so that's a whole lot of stuff just for working with files, and you're going to see the usage of them in a bit. Next, I'm going to define one of my custom classes, a very basic one, and it's called public class. This is what I'm choosing to name it, public class basic data. Okay, and I'm going to define the members inside of it. So inside public string player name, public vector3, that's vector3 player position. So you can see I'm going to store the player's name, I'm going to store the player's position, and I'm also going to store public float minutes, so that's time of day, and also public int npc count. Now this is very important. This is what's going to help me, because basic data, all of this information here is just going to be a single variable, and inside of the save file, this single variable that I'll make for basic data, it will take one line only in the save file. Then my NPCs will take a series of lines in the file for each NPC. Hence I have NPC count. That tells me how many lines there are for NPCs in my save file. It's a very logical and easy and simple way to figure out when does my tile data start in the save file. And that way I can just iterate through the appropriate lines in the save file and retrieve the tile map data. So yep, super duper simple, and just that's what I mean by a little bit of common sense, and then you've got something working nicely for you there. So private, next thing, so I'm going to make a variable out of this, so private basic data, and I'm just going to call the variable basic data is equal to a new basic data. So I've instantiated that variable now it exists. Okay, next one, my next class, this is for NPC data, public class, and this one is going to be called NPC Data. And this one's going to need a constructor as well, so it's more than just defining the member, these variables inside. I need to have a constructor to show how the data goes inside of it and gets stored into it. I guess something like that. That's how I imagine that explanation anyway. So public string NPC name, that's the first thing I want to get. Public string NPC action, so you remember that's the action, what they're doing right now. Public vector3, this is the NPC position. Next is public int NPC behavior index, so you can see I'm going to store that as well, and public int NPC waypoint index, so I remember which waypoint they're at or we're going to. So those are my variables. Now I'm going to do the constructor here. So public NPC, this is how you do it, public NPC data. So you can see it matches that. And now I'm going to show how stuff should go into it. And you have to pass in a string. And I'm just going to use nname, meaning NPC name. That's what it sort of stands for. Then the next one is string n action. The next one is a vector3. So matching this. And I'm just going to call it n position or n pos, I guess. N pos will do. And next one is an int n, so nb index. All right, and the next one is int nw index, meaning the waypoint index. All right, so just put that, close the round brackets there, curly brackets, and let's start defining this. So I'm going to say now I'm going to say NPC name is equal to n name. So pass it in. So NPC name is equal to n name. Next one, NPC action is equal to n action. Okay, NPC position is equal to n pos. Okay, NPC behavior index is equal to nb index. And then NPC waypoint index is equal to nw index. And that's how you have a more complex class defined. And now I can make a list of it and pass, make a variable up for adding into the list. So it's getting a bit more complex now, but that's how you make your custom variable basically. And this is going to be very well recognized by the save load, the inbuilt Unity functionality for saving and loading with JSON or JSON or whatever it's called. It's got some very clever functionality inside of Unity that's already built in, and by defining simple classes like this or classes like this, you'll be able to save and load data very nice and I guess easily, I suppose. I can't think of any better word to say. So now I'm going to make my list, and I'm going to say a private list. And what's the type of the list? It's Npc Data, and I'm just going to call it list of NPCs, or NPC is good enough. List of NPC is equal to new list of that type, and just close it with the round brackets. Done. So I've got my list prepared now, so I can put content into it, and then I'll iterate through that list and add those entries into the save file when I finally get to that. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I reckon that's all my variables done. Now I don't need to do anything with the tile map stuff, because if you recall back in our tile stuff, we do have a class there already for that, and we're just going to go off that. Basically, I'm going to use this method in here called capture, or I'm going to call this method rather from our save load script, capture all tiles in tilemap. It'll put them all into the list, and it'll make my life very easy, and I'm just going to use the list and iterate through it and add the entries into the save file. And yeah, and that's pretty much it, I guess, because I made it a very simple class, and these are well respected. I mean, there's no problem writing these simple types of variables to a save file using the JSON library. Okay, so that is that. So now let's start writing our methods. The first thing I'm going to do here, bizarrely enough, I'm just going to comment it out as well. It's actually called load game. I just thought I'll just gonna put that there so I don't end up deleting the start method for no reason. Truth is, I'm going to run this. This script is going to handle saving and loading, right? But in this video, I'm just writing the saving portion. We will get to the loading portion in a later video, not the next one, the one after that. I don't believe I need an update, so I will just get rid of that, and I'm going to make a method called public. It's public void save game. Why is it public? Because I have a button that's going to call on this method. That button, in our menu, our game menu, with the save icon that we made, it's going to end up calling this method. Okay, so what are we going to do in this method here? A whole bunch of things we're going to do in here. First off, we're going to set up our basic data variable. So basic data dot player name is equal to player dot name. So we've already got a reference to our player, you remember? So we plug that in the inspector, and a transform component has a property called name, and we're just referencing that. Nice, super duper simple. Basic data dot player position is equal to player dot position. Nice and simple. Again, it's from the transform component. There's data, there's a property there for position. We're just pulling on that. So next thing, basic data dot minutes is, now we're using our time manager script, our time script. So gmanager time dot minutes. Fantastic. So now I've captured the minutes. Next thing is basic data dot npc count is equal to npc container dot child count. That's why I put it in that game object there. I made an npc container because this is a way to make our life very easy and take out a lot of complexity and not have to search for anything. And we're just gonna put everything and put all our NPCs in one place and just do a child count automatically. Inbuilt Unity thing, make our life nice and simple. Very good. And next thing I want to do is I want to call my tile map script. So gmanager tile placement, so that's our tile script. Capture, or that thing I just showed you, capture all tiles in tile map. Great, and that's going to cause it to take all of the tiles in the construction tile map and put them all into that list for me. It's ready to be basically, it's ready for me to write it to file. Now, I've got a whole bunch of methods I still need to write. So this is done a couple of things for us, but now I'm just going to put in here a comment, and it's a method we're about to write. I'm just going to call it capture NPC data. And I'm just going to put it like this. And next, I'm going to do, also again, it's a comment. There's a whole bunch of methods I want to write. So check if folder exists and create it if not. I just like to try and make it very descriptive, and that's what it is. This is all our file related stuff here now. Set file path, that's the next method that I would like to call. I have to create these inside of the script. Okay, and the next one I want to create as well is delete previous save file. It's not really deleting. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up the file and just make it an empty string and then write new data to that same file. That way I'm not overwriting, I might have less lines in a future save because, you're removing tiles and stuff. But if you don't empty the contents, then you'll end up having additional lines there of data that will get loaded up, and it's wrong. So I just find I just empty the file, and it's just dumb and simple, basically. Excuse me. Next thing is write data to file. Okay, and that's the next method that I would write. So now I'm going to go ahead and create these methods and then uncomment these as I go. So I'm just going to just copy this so I keep it exactly correct. So void capture data, and let's start filling in this method here, capture NPC data. The first thing I'm going to do is say list of npc.clear. So clear out the list if there's already stuff in the list. Next, I'm going to iterate through our basically through our basic data. Well, I'm gonna iterate based on the number of NPCs that exist. Rather, that's what I'm trying to say. I'm gonna create a variable for each NPC, fill that variable with data, and then add it to the list. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is to just iterate through our NPC count, so the number of NPCs that we have. So for int I is equal to 0, I less than basic data dot npc count I plus plus. Okay, and so the first thing I want to do is say transform npc transform is equal to npc container dot get child, and I want to use I, so what we're iterating through. So that's the first child game object under the NPC container. So that's the first NPC. So we're just getting a reference to the transform on that NPC, so we can store its position just in a moment. Now I'm going to make a new NPC data variable. So just off the type NPC data, new NP, now I'm just making the name up, new NPC data is equal to new NPC data. Now I need to fill this in, right? So I'm going to do a round bracket here, and I've got a whole lot of line. You can see that it needs all of these things filled in here to be successful. So I'm just going to go to the next line and just sort of make it a bit cleaner that way. First thing I want to pass in is the npc transform.name. See, that's why I took a reference to that NPC, the first, well, the object inside of the NPC container, and as you iterate, you go through each of them. So npc transform.name, that's the first item, then comma. Let's go to the next thing. So then npc transform, and then I'm going to say get component. I want to get the AI behavior on it. So I'm going to say AI behavior. We're good. We're accessing that, our round brackets, and then say my current action. Good. So now I've got a reference to that. I also want to then, excuse me, it's not a semicolon, it's a comma. It's onto the next item now. So now I want to capture, more or less, I want to capture the NPC transform.position. Next thing is the behavior index. To make my life easy, I'll just copy this get component code and put that right here. And it's not my current action, but it's going to be the behavior index. And I'm going to paste it again, and this time it's the waypoint index. So next waypoint index. And now I can close this off and put a semicolon. So there we go. I've basically created a whole new variable here and passed in all this information, and now I can add that variable to my list. So what am I going to say? I'm simply going to say here at the bottom of this list of npc.add, and what am I adding? It's the new npc data, and that's awesome. So I've got that, I've captured the npc data, and I can now uncomment this as well. Great, so that's one method done. Okay, the next one that I need to do is check if folder exists and create it if not. So let's go ahead and make this method. So void check if folder exists and create it if not, and let's fill out the contents as well. So the very first thing is I'm going to define my folder path. So I'm going to say in here folder path is equal to path.combine. So this is an inbuilt functionality inside of the system.io business, so that's some clever and very helpful stuff for us. How it works, that's another matter. So path.combine, and I'm going to combine my folder path, which is if you recall, if I have go up here, what was it? Folder name is, oh, so it's just a string, so it's folder path. So actually, hang on. No, I'm not going to do folder path. I'm going to do folder name. That's right. What I want to do is I want to combine. So, excuse me. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to combine the application.persistent data path with my folder name, so it creates a folder called save data in the game's persistent folder location, which will be guaranteed to be there in Windows or on Mac, basically. So let's go back to that, and it's not folder path. I want to say path.combine application.persistent data path, and then I guess basically comma the next item that I want to. Is it comma? Let me just think about that. I guess it is. So I just want to basically, yeah, string path1 and path2. So then I want to put in the folder name here as well. And that is going to create that new path for us. It's going to create the path, but it's not yet creating the folder, by the way. So that's where the next bit of code comes in. So I need to now check. So if not directory.exists, this folder path. So if there isn't a folder there already, yeah, we better create one. That's what it is. So then I'm going to say directory.create directory at that folder path. And that will actually create the folder for us inside of Windows or inside of a Mac. So it'll just happen for us, which is great. So now I can uncomment this bit as well. Next, I'm going to copy the set file path method name, and I'm going to define that. So now I'm going to write that one. So void set file path. And inside of this is very basic. All I need to do is for the file path. So folder path is one thing. So folder path is telling us where in the operating system environment is the folder. The next thing is I need to know what is the file that I expect to find at that folder path. So I'm going to say file path is equal to path.combine, and in this case it's the folder path, and I'm choosing to say basic data.player name. That's what I'm naming my files with. I'm using the player name. So you go to that folder, and inside of the folder there'll be, if the player's name is player, for example, then you'll find a file in there, player, but I also need to add on the extension, so plus file extension, and just close that off. So now you're gonna find in there in that folder a file name player.txt. So that's the idea here. That's what I'm doing there. Okay, so let's uncomment that too now. So we've got that method done as well. Okay, next one, delete previous save file. Okay, so now we need to get rid of the content of the save file before we write to it. So void delete previous save file, and let's enter in the code here as well. So I'm going to say if file path dot length is not equal to 0, because if there's nothing at the folder, then there's no point in trying to open a file and empty it, right? It means there is no file, right? So file dot write all text and say file at that file path and string.empty. And that's just gonna that's basically gonna open the file, just put an empty string in there and close it. And then, well, I guess I didn't even close it, but it's sort of obvious that it will close sometime. And that's it. So now the file is empty. So let's delete our previous save file. Now next I need to write the data to file. Right, now we're getting to the really good stuff. And we're getting there. So void write data to file. Okay, and here I'm going to say using stream writer. It's an inbuilt capability, stream writer. Okay. And I'm just going to make it's off. That's the type, and I'm going to make a variable called stream writer. Just choose to call it that. Is equal to file dot create text file path. Okay, so now we are going to be able to write, and we're going to use curly braces here. And inside of that, I'm going to say, I'm going to actually start writing lines of data into the file. Okay, so the very first thing that I'm going to write is stream writer. I mean, we've got our file open now, and now we're going to write to it. So stream writer dot write line, and I'm going to use the Json Utility. It's inbuilt stuff for Unity. Dot to JSON. And what are we going to pass in? What's the object value? It's basic data. And because it's a simple class, no problem. It will be able to turn it. Basically, JSON is going to take that variable, turn it into a string. It's going to be completely string in its own format and write it into the file. And we're going to use the JSON utility, tell it what type it's going to convert the string back from. So when we read the file, it'll take an understanding, oh, the type is of the type basic data, and so I should interpret the string in that way and restore it back as a basic data. So that's very, very powerful and very, very helpful for us. Now next, for basically a for loop. So for int, I'm going to write all the NPCs now. For int j, I just decided to say start with j this time. For int j equals 0, j less than list of npc.count, j plus plus. Then in that case, I'm going to say stream writer dot write line, and I'm going to use the JSON utility. And dot to JSON, what am I passing in? List of NPC, and it's item j in our iteration. And that's pretty much that. So cool. So now I've got that written. I'm writing all of the NPCs to the file. Next, I'm going to write all of our tilemap stuff. So for int I equal to 0, I less than G manager tile placement dot list of tiles in tilemap dot count I plus plus. Okay, and then we're going to write this. So stream writer dot write line and JSON utility dot to JSON G manager tile placement dot list of tiles in tilemap, which index, it's I, of course. Let's close that out, and that's it. We've now written our tiled map data to the file. Now let's uncomment this bit here, write data to file, and yeah, we're doing pretty well. And you know, while I'm at it, I'm just having a think about this. I can say, just for our sake, what would be a logical place to put it? I can say folder path is equal to blah, 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 blah. I think I'll put it in here. So what I'm going to do is a debug.log folder path. Not folder name, folder path, excuse me, folder path. So I'll be able to see where Unity is actually saving that. So, I want to go and open up the file, right? That'd be super interesting. So that's pretty much that. That's our script written for saving. Very, very good. Very totally awesome, I think. And let's go ahead and just see it actually works. You never know. So let's jump into here. Let's have a look at our save load. Everything is looking good. Now obviously I need to assign it to the button, so let's go ahead and do that. So canvas menu, panel save, button save. Let's add that in on click, put in here game manager, put in the game manager save load, save game. All right, so now we're on to something. Okay, let's go ahead and hit play, and basically anything in the construction layer is going to get saved. Let's go ahead and put this like that, walls, and let's just move our player there. Let's take note of the player's position. It's some very awkward value there, minus 2.64. Let's just try and remember that number. Let's hit save. Okay, so our game just saved, and it's telling us where to go. So I'm going to just copy basically this whole address here, this folder path. You can do the same, and then just jump over in your Windows or your in your Mac, and then go there. Okay. Alright, so I jumped over, I just pasted the address into the bar up there, and let's go ahead and open this up. And didn't we say it was player was at a position of like minus 2.64 or something bizarre like that? Yeah, pretty sure we did say that. I wonder, did I leave it running? Nah, I shut it down. Oh well, too bad. So I can't actually confirm that, but anyway, that's what I remember it being. That it was minus 2.64, and the time looks about right. That's 5:19 a.m. If I'm not making an embarrassingly wrong calculation there, but I think it is. And yes, NPC count is 1. There's only one NPC. Look, his name is there. His action is there. He's sleeping. His position is there. His behavior index. And yeah, obviously there was no waypoint index or behavior index for the sleeping behavior. And here are all the tiles now. You can see all of the tiles, the tile index, the tile location, all stored into the file. It's totally awesome. So what you're going to see in the next video when we get to it, let me just close that down and see, you can see it's player.txt. In the next video, what my objective is to be able to have a list of games that you can choose to load from. So now you're going to be able to have different player names. You're going to save your game, and then I'm hoping that your file will get saved according to your player name, and then you'll see that those lists of possible player names there that you can then load from. Well, just thinking about it, just thinking with the way I've got it set up, it will be actually video 15 where you're gonna see the actual, having lots of buttons that you can select from. But I'm just thinking about it, it isn't until you load the game that in my load game method that I'll have in the future, where you're actually gonna assign the player name into the game scene. So in the next video, at least we'll have the functionality there where buttons will be able to be created for different save files, and we'll take it from there. So anyway, we've done a lot in this video. We accomplished a lot. It's super interesting and super neat what you can do with the saving yourself. Like now you at least understand you can apply this to so many different projects that you're gonna work on as you have fun working in Unity. Anyway, that's enough for this video, so I guess I'll see you in the next one.